So now that we have successfully downloaded our ISO file for Ubuntu and we also have our VMware player installed, let's go ahead and see how we can create this Ubuntu server and get it up and running. So I'm gonna make my window just a little smaller temporarily so you can see what the icon for VMware Workstation Player looks like here. So you can see it. So this is, you should have an icon like this either on your desktop or in your shortcut menu after installing VM Workstation Player. So you'll just double click this to run it. And I'm going to bring it onto my window here. So you're going to have your own VMware Workstation 12 player now. And you'll notice I've already got servers on mine. I've got 2 of them already here. So we're going to create a new one, and you're going to create your first in your installation of VMware Player. So if I click back on the home here, you'll notice that at the very top here we have a Create New Virtual Machine. So go ahead and click Create a New Virtual Machine, and you'll notice that it's prompting here for an installer disk image file ISO. Now if you had a DVD or other media that you would wish to install from, like that you've gotten from some other source, you can use that, but as we just downloaded it, and that's probably the typical way that you would acquire the latest version of Ubuntu is by downloading it. You can see we got this installer disk image file, and if you can click browse and browse to wherever you downloaded it at, and I have it sitting right out here on my desktop. And you can see it's almost a gigabyte in size. So that's all you have to do is just select it here. And this will tell, you can see right here, Ubuntu 64-bit 14.04.3 detected. Now we can click Next. And it wants us to personalize our Linux version, our Ubuntu version. So here is, we can name this whatever we want for the full name. I'm going to call this Master Odoo Developer. So we know that this is, and I think I will call it Mastering Odoo Development. Keep it the same. And for our username, we can go ahead and let's go ahead and say Odoo DEV for developer. And so this is going to be our username that's going to be able to access administration rights within our workstation. And so we want to set up a password. Now I'm just doing this for educational purposes. I'm not going to have anything on this server that is required to have security. But you're going to want to, depending upon your own requirements, have a robust password so that it can be protected, particularly if you plan to set up Ubuntu Odoo server for production purposes. So after you set up this username and password, you're going to want to make sure, write this down, put it in a notepad, don't forget it. But this is all you have to set up, and we'll hit Next. Now, it wants us to give us a virtual machine name, so we can go ahead and say this is our Mastering Odoo. We'll just call it that so that we don't get too long. And that'll give us a machine name, and you'll have a minimum disk size. Now, 20 gigabytes plenty for what we're going to do. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say 10 gigabytes. This will depend, again, a lot on your installation and what your requirements are. For a development server, for just doing Odoo development, you shouldn't need a whole lot of hard drive space because you're really just going to have maybe 3, 4, 5 different versions of Odoo installed and some test data. But again, it depends on what you're wanting to do. For our example, we're just going to set our maximum disk size to 10 gigabytes. And you are fine on a development server, as far in my experience, of splitting the virtual disk into multiple files. So let's go ahead and hit Next, and we'll get a little bit of rundown. You can see that we have a gigabyte of memory here. You might want to go into Customize Hardware and bump this up possibly to 2 gigabytes of memory, just to give yourself a little more memory. And here are other things that you can adjust. And again, this is more of a video on just the basics that you need to get running Ubuntu, but there's a lot more that you can learn about optimizing Ubuntu for Odoo. So once we have these basics set up, we can click Finish, and you'll notice that it's going to power the machine on, and it started recognizing hardware that's on my own PC. It's recognizing it so it can now be used inside Ubuntu. And we'll go ahead and resize our virtual machine a little bit so it's a little easier for you to see on the video. And just like that, we've already installed Ubuntu on this Windows machine running inside a VMware player. So it's not very hard, and it's still got some more installation and configuration to go through, but as you can see, it's not very difficult. You just have to follow the prompts, and if you get stuck, there's a lot of resources online and a lot of community support that can help you depending upon various hardware that you may have issues with. But one of the things you'll notice about the new versions of Ubuntu, it's pretty easy to install. It's easy to get up and running. In this case, we're using the desktop version because we are going to use some of the niceties that come from having a GUI interface so that we can edit our files a little easier. Ubuntu will reboot after it's installed all of its prerequisites, and you'll see some debugging that'll go through where it'll have a lot of okays, and that just helps for troubleshooting if in fact something did go wrong. For most systems, it's just going to go right away and you'll be up and set. Now, how long it takes for your Ubuntu to install on your system will have a lot to do with what kind of computer you're using. If you're using an old laptop that's 7 years old, you can expect to spend a lot longer than if you're running a new desktop machine that's just a few months old. Okay, so you'll notice that we have, after it's been rebooted and everything has been installed, this is basically the first interaction we get with our new Ubuntu system. You'll notice that, like in Windows and other systems, it's got a graphical interface with a mouse, and we can go right here to type our password. And so this will be the same password we provided when we did the installation. So just like that, we have a working desktop Ubuntu environment that we can now install Odoo on and then begin customizing and learning how the Odoo framework fits together. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bigger so that we're able to use all of our screen. And we can work pretty much now within the Ubuntu desktop environment. Now, one of the first things we're going to want to do is we want to make sure that we have all the updates and that Ubuntu is ready for us to install Odoo on. So one of the easiest ways to bring up a terminal window is you hold down your Control key, then you hold down your Alt key, and then you hit T. And that will bring up a terminal in Ubuntu. So again, you can bring up a second one the same way. Hold down your Control key, then hold down your Alt key, hold them both down, and then hit a T, and you'll get a terminal. So we really only need one terminal right now. Now, if you've never used Ubuntu before, a lot of times when you do use Ubuntu, you're not going to be in a desktop environment. You're just going to be accessing a Ubuntu server without a graphical interface. And that's really what this terminal is. It's kind of dumped us out into the non-graphical interface. And we'll still be using that a lot because it's just very handy, and there's some important commands that you'll need to know. Now, we're going to go ahead at this point and say that you've got Ubuntu installed, and we're going to do one test just real quick to make sure we can get out on the internet. So I'm going to type in sudo apt and then a hyphen. That's right next to the right of the 0 on the number key at the top. And we're going to say git update and hit enter. And now notice how it prompts us for our password. That's because when we say sudo, that means we want to have administrative permissions. We're actually changing something within the Ubuntu system, and it's a security check to make sure that we haven't stepped away from the keyboard or there's some other reason why we wouldn't be authenticated to make this change. So we just put in our password and hit go, and you'll notice that it says out there hit HTTP, and then it's listing all these packages. So what we've done is we've told Ubuntu to do any updates that are required for the system, and you can see there that it's done. So we're going to stop the video at this point because now we're going to actively begin in our next lecture at installing Odoo onto this new Ubuntu server.